Thank you, everybody who supports the movement for a nonviolent revolution in the mental health system. That's not just a word there, revolution. Reform has fed the mental health system. The mental health industry eats catastrophes and builds itself through reform. It has to be through nonviolent revolution.
Martin Luther King, in his speeches and his essays over and over again, he would say something similar. He said, psychologists have a favorite word, and that word is maladjusted. And Martin Luther King would say, we ought to be maladjusted. We ought to be maladjusted to poverty, oppression, racism, war. Then he said, and this is more than 10 times he said this, Martin Luther King said, the world is in dire need of a new organization, the International Association for the Advancement of Creative Maladjustment.
Modern psychology has a word that is probably used more than any other word in psychology. It is the word maladjusted. But as I move toward my conclusion, I would like to say to you today, in a very honest manner, that there are some things in our society and some things in our world for which I'm proud to be maladjusted. And I call upon all men of goodwill to be maladjusted to these things until the good society is realized.
I kind of knew when I was locked up in the hospital and taking a lot of drugs, well, I was giving a lot of drugs, that there was something more than this, something more. I got to meet some really cool people. I met Judy Chamberlain, I met Howie the Harp, I met at night, I met all these people. I was just blown away by them.
There's 43 involuntary held patients in 2008 had 300 doses of ECT forced on them. Remember, there's no test here. There's no x-rays, there's no scan. There's nothing previously. It is just simply the opinion of the doctor that this is the right thing to do. And they're forced to take it against their will. They're forced into psychiatric units. And all of that is a huge part of the stigma. And MadPride will change all of that, but never talking about it.
In terms of modern day psychiatry, particularly in Ireland, let's just stay within the Irish context, I mean, you believe there needs to be some serious changes.
Oh, psychiatry in Ireland is at an all-time low. When I started psychiatry, I started with Professor Ivor Brown. Psychotherapy was so much part of what we were doing. It was so much part that when I got my basic degree in psychiatry, my membership degree, I went on and actually studied psychotherapy. And the idea of not going in the direction of psychotherapy it just seemed inappropriate.
There's alchemy on the wards, a revolution in my soul, a wolf in my doorway, and sand between my toes, and sand between my toes. There's a lover in my heart, and children at my feet, a mad woman in every woman. We're taken to the streets, we're taken to the streets. We're meeting at the front line. Do we have to go to war? All we want is change.
what I'd like to see for the future is that no one can be forced to do anything they don't want to do themselves, anywhere, regardless of psychiatry or anywhere else. I would like that if people want help, if they're in some kind of a place where they feel they want help and they're finding this world too hard to cope with themselves, first of all they would want it, and secondly it would be help that they would help them to be find themselves again and transform, as that's what we're doing all the time anyway. That's what growth is. You die to something and you rise to something else. So that they would be able to go to safe places that are not clinical, definitely not hospitals, because hospitals are to do with physical things that you go to get a new hip or whatever, you go to get operations and different things. But this would not be to do with those kind of things at all. This is to do with feeling good yourself, that you can go on in this world and contribute and be a happier person. And in order to do that, you need to be understood. You know, we always say about a priest who doesn't know very much about marriage, like, because he's never had children or whatever. And I think most people would agree with that. But when it comes to trauma or psychological distress, people don't seem to see that. They seem to think that people that go to college and study books that really don't often understand. I know this from being a teacher myself. I've taught music for most of my life. I know, and I've done the theory side of music as well as the practical side. And I know a lot of my students would be more inclined to want to learn off what I call copy and paste something. You know, you can cog without having the stuff there. You can cog it in your mind and not really understand it. And I think they're the kind of people that get involved in medicine, that they don't really understand often what they're saying, and therefore how can they really help somebody? A person who might never go to university at all might understand it far better because they relate with the heart, the soul, and they know the person and they love the person. We've been involved in exposing electroshock and the human rights aspect to people, especially being forced treated with electroshock. And as I speak, psychiatrists still can force a person to have electroshock, even if they don't want it. As I speak, if I was unfortunate enough to find myself in hospital again, and I know electroshock causes brain damage, I know the psychotropic drugs cause brain damage too, I can be forced to have either, even though it's very obvious from my life, if people who know my story, that they did cause serious harm to me. And that's wrong. It's wrong that people can't decide what's best for themselves.
Well, my own journey of enlightenment started, I suppose, around about the year 2000 or so as well. Before that, I was your average layman, accepting everything that I was being told by the experts. I was kind of a carer for Mary. I was minding her in the sense that making sure that she took her medication on the time when she was supposed to take it. Every day she had a little box with all her tablets in it, and I was supervising that, and I was going along very much with everything that I was being told by the experts. And then it was around the year 2000, I think it coincided with the publication of Beyond Prozac, that book by Terry Lynch, which was very enlightening for me. It put everything in a whole new perspective, and that had come on top of another book by Dr. Peter Breggin, an American psychiatrist, which also was saying the same message essentially. And both of those helped me very much to go along with what Mary herself had come to realise as well, that the medication she was on was doing her a lot of damage. And maybe she was better off seeing something in a completely different way altogether, which she then proceeded to do from that particular time on, you know. Dr. Terry Lynch has been very good. He's a lone voice in Ireland, unfortunately. He has spoken out a lot, he has written, but he has, for that he has been, I wouldn't know if you use the word blackballed or not, but he has certainly not got as many invitations to various conferences and so on as you would expect, I think, for a man of his knowledge.
Medication, as I see it, has a place, short-term where possible, but honesty there should be honesty in terms of medication, honesty in terms of how it works and acts. I would never say to somebody that your medication is correcting a chemical imbalance, because that's never been established. That's a lie. Couldn't. It's an untruth. I can't tell somebody that. Similarly, I can't say that medication is treating an unidentified neurobiological disorder. Basically, what I can say for certain is that medication seems to change how people feel. The most common effects are that they tranquilize, sometimes it's stimulation, people experience numbness, so it changes how people feel. So I think telling people the truth is a human right too. Accurate empathy is an extremely important concept in all of this. It means a truly accurate understanding of people's story and experiences. And I think that's pretty rare. It's certainly rare within psychiatry and general practice.
He still is ploughing away. I admire him tremendously. We've had him speaking at a number of MindFreedom conferences. Our most recent one was our 10th anniversary conference here in Cork. He spoke at that, and he also spoke at a conference in Cork when we had Robert Whittaker, who was another influence in my own enlightenment as well. Well, at that stage, I suppose that was only fairly recently, so I had kind of travelled along that road then. But Robert Whittaker came to Cork, I think it was about 3 years ago, and he's an American journalist who has written a book called Anatomy of an Epidemic, and he questions the whole overuse of medication and what it's causing in the rise of so-called mental illness in America as well today. And he's spoken all over the world now as well about it, and we were very fortunate to get him here in Cork as well.
From 1987 forward, and 1987, by the way, is the year Prozac arrives in the market, so this is the beginning of the second generation era. Now we're going to look at the same metrics. From 1987 to 2007 in the United States, the number of people on disability rose to more than 4 million. So it tripled. And now our disability rate is around 1 in 75.
So they were all the influences on me, and I suppose since then we became involved in MindFreedom, and that's what we see ourselves as doing, essentially passing on the information that we have learned and I have learned to a wider public who would still be in a situation where I was myself, I'd say over 20 years ago, going along with the medical model system and believing all that they're being told, that the myths, as somebody refers to them, the myths of the chemical imbalance and these kind of things that you have to take. It's the same as taking insulin for diabetes. You have to be on your medication. Things which are completely unscientific and in fact myths. Myths is a very good word to describe them as well. So that's where I have now found myself, and we continue to campaign. We have conferences from time to time. We lobby politicians. We campaign on the basis of human rights. We campaign against forced electroshock. We campaign for alternatives, better alternatives, and there are there, but it's a very hard job to kind of get these taken on board by the powers that be, who seem to be very much in the grip of the medical model way of thinking, coming from the College of Psychiatry, and of course behind all of that there is the subtext of the influence of the pharmaceutical industry in Ireland as well, which obviously is a major industry, providing lots of jobs, and you would get the impression that the government would be very, very slow to kind of in any way be critical of the pharmaceutical industry and anything that the pharmaceutical industry would be involved in, and instead it's it's lauded, and if you find yourself taking part in discussions on radio or in the media and so on as well, very often what you're saying is more than counterbalanced by the other side. So we would see ourselves as having still an uphill struggle to kind of get the message across to the public in that regard.
I came involved with MindFreedom, with the music, because I met Mary Maddock at swimming, and at that time I'd lost a lot of use of my arm and I'd been given painkillers, and I was just telling Mary this day that I was coming off the tablets myself, and I felt that my arm was working better, because at this time I was like a zombie, and the more medication I was taking, the worse I was. And I assumed I was taking painkillers. So Mary had said to me, what was the name of these tablets? And I told her, and she said, well, they're antidepressants. And I said, well, they were painkillers, which I'd been given for my arm. And I said, I'm coming off them. So in any case, she said, no, be aware, don't come off them altogether. Take your time with them. So I was down to 3 then. I was on 4 at the beginning, which is 100 mils. I was down then to 3, and I was already in my mind to cut it down to 2. So in any way, she said, well, be very careful. So I'd done that, and anyway, I'd come off them, and I had my use back in my arm, which I hadn't had since the year 2000. And I'd be down at the swimming pool to try and get some action going there. And we got talking about singing, and I said, oh, I love my singing, you know. I can't sing, but I love singing. And she said, well, I play the piano, and, you know, she said, come along and have a few lessons. So I said, yes, I'll do that. So getting friendly with Mary over the music, and how she was using music with the people in the group, I got involved that way.
I met Mary Maddock about 1.5 years ago. I'd actually heard of her a long time before that though, and I knew that she was in the community helping people who have been through any psychiatric crisis or trauma, I suppose. My mum also told me about MindFreedom about 8 years ago, and I looked up the site, the American site, and I think it was really interesting. There's a lot of people with their stories of, I suppose, survival of the psychiatric system and the different bad situations that did occur to some people over in America, and I think that similar things are happening over here, but people maybe don't have enough support, that it's not getting out in public, it's not known like that some people can suffer greatly within the psychiatric system, and in relation to human rights aspects there are some negative things happening. So Mary has been really supportive, and I got to meet all of Mary's friends who are like, she seems to get friends everywhere, so that's good, and she is a very caring person, and she's interested in the cause and for helping people maybe who have become isolated, and you know, they need help and they need caring and love, and Mary's great for that. And so I joined her music group, and she's been teaching me the tin whistle, and the classes are free, so that's great. I'll owe her like a lot of money by the end of this, and so we've played in a few different places in Cork, in particular in UCC, and it's good to get together and play music together, usually on a Monday, and that has been great fun, and Mary seems to know a lot about music too, so yeah.
Well, I was, first of all, I got caught up in the psychiatric system in my teens, first when I was 17 for depression, and later at 19 I was attending UCC and got involved with this Gaelic civil rights group, we were giving an exhibition, and I went I suppose I got very overexcited and hyper, and ended up in a private psychiatric hospital in Cork for 6 months because of that. And while there, I was bombarded with shock treatment, with ECT, and given very heavy medication, and I actually ran away from the hospital. But subsequently I was in public hospitals for the next 40 years really. I'm now 61. So I met Mary and Jim at CAN, this CAN group, a very big group that formed in Cork in the early 2000s by people involved in the psychiatric system and their families wishing to get a reform really in the area. So I found that Mary and I had a lot in common, and Mary told me about the MindFreedom Ireland group that she had started up, and I got involved then. So, and I'm still involved to this day. Well, I got involved in the electroshock campaign because I feel very strongly about electroshock and the harm it does, which was not made clear to me at all in hospital. And I was just told that was temporary memory loss, whereas actually what happens is they induce an epileptic seizure. And this has been done to me so many times. And actually I did have a seizure at one stage in hospital in the 80s, and had to have an ECG afterwards. And the harm, the fact that it does permanent brain damage, and that's why people actually seem to get happier after it. That isn't admitted really by the authorities. And we had about 5 electroshock demonstrations in Cork over the years that I took part in. But then I had the opportunity of going on TV3 in 2012 and debating with a psychiatrist called Anne Jeffers from the Royal College of Psychiatrists in Ireland, debating ECT. And I had the opportunity of saying at that Carletti, who actually invented electroshock, when he actually saw it being performed on a person, he said it ought to be abolished. And any points I brought up, I found that she really hadn't much answer for them, and I got very good feedback from around the world on that programme. But in a way, maybe it's only a drop in the ocean.
I became involved in this area arising out of my interest in human rights and civil rights, having been in South Africa and seeing what lack of it does to society, both individuals and groups. So when I came back to Ireland, I joined the Irish Council of Civil Liberties and the Advocacy for Prisons, Irish Prison Reform Trust, and in Dublin when I was training to be a psychotherapist. When I came to Cork, I discovered a great crowd of people who were involved around advocating in mental health, and it was the Cork Advocacy Network, which championed the causes of people who were finding it very difficult to adjust to the psychiatric system, which I knew very little about at the time. And there was that, from there, the Cork Advocacy Network, that I joined the network back around the turn of the millennium, and became educated by people like Mary Maddock and a woman called Helena, who has tragically left us, who I knew and loved, and others, John McCarthy, who was quite famous, who has also left us, and Michael Curry, who has also left us, who was a great doctor and psychiatrist, and very different than the conventional medical psychiatrist in Dublin. So that was my beginnings, and I ended up the chairman of the Cork Advocacy Network for a short time, a period when it was having a problem. I suppose Mary was the one person in the Cork Advocacy Network who had a really profound big picture of what was going on. John McCarthy and Mary were the two natural leaders of the Advocacy Network, I thought, in my opinion. But John was more of the action man and Mary was more contemplative. She hadn't been a nun, she was more spiritual. And she had a greater emotional grasp of what was going on from a woman's perspective, and bearing in mind that it's mostly women who actually bear the brunt of the wrongdoings or the problems in psychiatry and in medicine generally. So it was she really that I realised was the leader, the natural leader, and I suppose I made a choice then to be support for her. She had an unique experience which she was prepared to publicise, and she had immense courage.
Well, my experience with ECT started on the third day after childbirth.
And Mary joins us in studio this morning. Mary, thanks for coming in. We got a glimpse there of your experience with the treatment or the therapy. Could you bring us back first of all as to why it was deemed necessary and why it was administered?
Because prior to being in the hospital, I had got nitrous oxide, a gas was administered for pain relief. I had got a lot of it because my labour was very long, and I reacted to that gas, and then I was given more drugs in labour. Sparine was one of them. It is neuroleptic. On my records, allergic was written down, so obviously there was problems around it. And yes, all the reactions that I had afterwards, they were never taken into account. I was just sent to a psychiatric hospital, taken away from my baby.
Well, we became great friends. We first met in Carrickmore Hospital, and she used to go out during the morning and come back for lunch. And well, we just got chatting, and in the evening we often would say the rosary together. And she was really kind of fighting the system, but because she'd been in the hospital so long, she was kind of a bit institutionalized. So when she got out, she invited me to her home, and I would often spend time with her at the house, in the home, at night times as well, and daytimes, for stretches of time. And we got to know each other very well, and I would help her out, do bacon and eggs and things that the rest of us would know, and she had known, but had forgotten how to do. And then other meals as well. And anyway, altogether, with Mary's influence, she introduced me to Mary. We founded this MindFreedom Ireland and took it from there, and really fighting the psychiatrists and psychiatric medicine, where they're just so heavy-handed that, as you well know, that overdope people, keep you in hospital too long, put you through your paces really when it's not necessary, and I wouldn't let you out, at all. And I don't know if you've ever been in Carrickmore, have you?
Not Carrickmore.
Well, but something like,
yeah,
that's about the worst actually that you could be in. And anyway, so that's where I met Helena and became firm friends. We really did. And it so happened when whatever happened to her in the end, I was actually in the hospital myself. Otherwise I would have been there with her, So it's tragic really that we lost her. Because she, for example, when people are depressed, she was explaining how you become helpless and hopeless. And you can't actually do anything for yourself, apart from the fact that you actually have a suffering in your soul that becomes so great that you can't quite understand it.
Psychiatry is the only form of medicine that diagnoses you without having any physical test. if you anybody is a psychiatrist, you're giving me in, it'll be an interview I get. They'll be asking me questions. In fact, they don't ask very good questions even to know you either. But if there's something wrong with my brain and I have a tumour or I have something else, you'll be able to see that I have a tumour. You'll be able to know there's something wrong with it. But if they tell you, their whole basis is that people who are in need of psychiatry have a chemical imbalance in their brain and they need drugs to fix it. Well, there's no test, there's nothing to be able to say, when I was in psychiatry or anybody else in psychiatry, that you have a broken brain, there's nothing wrong with your brain. And there's no doctor can say that one brain is supposed to be normal and another brain is supposed to be different when it comes to psychiatry. And yet, they're going on that false premise all the time. But what is true is that drugs can alter the chemistry of the brain. That is true. So, and what is true as well is that they don't know what they're really doing with the drugs. It's guinea pig work. You'll be told to take something. If that doesn't work, you'll be told to take something else. If that doesn't work, they'll up the dosage. If that doesn't work, you might get another drug. Then you might have 3 or 4 drugs at the one time. That's wrong. Then when it comes to electroshock, it always causes brain damage. It always depletes some of your memory. And electroshock is like on the computer when you delete the button and it's gone. You can't get it back. And that's every memory we have as part of ourselves, and to forcefully decide that you will take away the memories of somebody else when you don't know what you're at, that's really, really bad. And that's what doctors are doing.
There's alchemy on the wards, a revolution in my soul, a wolf in my doorway, and sand between my toes, and sand between